Okay, welcome everybody to this edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Episode 73 is ready to go on this September 30th, 2025. And have you ever held a Rubik's Cube in your hands? That colorful puzzle with 6 sides, each made of tiny squares? For some, it's a brain teaser, and for others, it's an obsession. But behind this little cube lies a fascinating story, and we're going to tell you about that story. The history of the Rubik's Cube is coming up next on this edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Okay, welcome everybody to the program. I'm your host, Jason DeCanio, ready for another edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Episode 73 is upon us, and ready to go with a look at the history of the Rubik's Cube. Yes, and it all started back in 1974 by Erno Rubik, who's a Hungarian architect and professor of design. Originally, he called it the Magic Cube. And his goal wasn't to create a toy, but rather a teaching tool to help his students understand three-dimensional geometry. When Rubik scrambled his creation for the first time, he faced the same challenge as every player since, putting it back together. It actually took him about a month to solve it himself. But then in 1979, he partnered with the toy company, Ideal Toy Corp. The Magic Cube was rebranded as the Rubik's Cube, and it exploded in popularity. By the early 1980s, the cube had become a worldwide sensation with over 100 million cubes sold in just a few years. It wasn't just a toy. It became a cultural icon. People held competitions, magazines published solving guides, and the cube showed up in TV ads, shows, and movies. But like many fads, the cube's popularity eventually declined by the late 1980s, but it never truly disappeared. In the early 2000s, the rise of the internet and global competitions brought it back to the spotlight. The World Cube Association was founded in 2004, organizing official competitions around the globe. A new sport was born, speed cubing, solving the cube as fast as possible. Records fell quickly from minutes to seconds. And today, the Rubik's Cube is more than just a puzzle. It's a symbol of creativity, problem-solving, and persistence. Over 450 million cubes have been sold worldwide, and the speed cubing community is stronger than ever, with world records now under 3.5 seconds. The cube has inspired math, art, music, and even robotics. It remains one of the best-selling puzzles of all time, proving that sometimes the simplest ideas can make the biggest impact. So the next time you pick up a Rubik's Cube, remember, you're holding a piece of history. That's right. But also, in March of 1970, Larry D. Nichols invented a 2x2x2 puzzle with pieces rotatable in groups and filed a Canadian patent application for it. His cube was held together by magnets. He was also granted U.S. patent 3,655,201 on April 11th of 72, 2 years before the actual Rubik's Cube was invented. On April 9, 1970, Frank Fox applied to patent an amusement device, a type of sliding puzzle on a spherical surface with at least two 3x3 arrays intended to be used for the game of noughts and crosses. He received his UK patent 1344259 on January 16th of 1974. And as you know, Erno Rubik in the mid-70s, he worked at the Department of Interior Design at the Academy of Applied Arts and Crafts in Budapest, Although it is widely reported that the cube was built as a teaching tool to help his students understand the 3D objects, his actual purpose was solving the structural problem of moving the parts independently without the entire mechanism falling apart. He did not realize that he had created a puzzle until the first time he scrambled his new cube and then tried to restore it, which took him about a month to solve himself. He applied for a patent in Hungary for his magic cube on January 30th of 1975, and HU 170062 was granted later that year. He wrote his experience in his book, Cubed, the Book of All of Us. The first test batches of the Magic Cube were produced in late 1977 and released in toy shops in Budapest. Magic Cube was held together with interlocking plastic pieces that prevented the puzzle from being easily pulled apart, unlike the magnets in Nicholas's design. And with Erno Rubik's permission, businessman Tibor Lagzi took a cube to Germany's Nuremberg Toy Fair in February of '79 in an attempt to popularize it. It was noticed by Seven Towns founder Tom Kremer, and they signed a deal with Ideal Toys in September of '79 to release the Magic Cube worldwide. Ideal wanted at least a recognizable name to trademark, and that arrangement put Rubik in the spotlight because the Magic Cube was renamed after its inventor in 1980. The puzzle made its international debut at the toy fairs of London, Paris, Nuremberg, and New York in January and February of '80. After its international debut, the progress of the cube towards the toy shop shelves of the West was briefly halted so that it could be manufactured to Western safety and packaging specifications. A lighter cube was produced, and Ideal decided to rename it the Gordian Knot, and Inca Gold were considered, but the company finally decided on Rubik's Cube, and the first batch was exported from Hungary in May of 1980. The packaging had a few variations depending on the country, most popular being a clear plastic cylinder, but cardboard versions were also used. The cube itself had slightly different variations in the order of the colors. Western versus Japanese color scheme were blue, yellow, and they're switched, and some of the cubes did not have a white piece logo. After the first batches of Rubik's Cubes were released in May of 1980, initial sales were modest, but Ideal began a television advertising campaign in the middle of the year, which it supplemented with newspaper advertisements. At the end of 1980, Rubik's Cube won a German Game of the Year Special Award and won similar awards for Best Toy in the UK, France, and the US. By 1981, Rubik's Cube had become a craze, and it is estimated that in the period from 1980 to 83, around 200 million Rubik's Cubes were sold worldwide. In March of 81, a speed cubing championship organized by the Guinness Book of World Records was held in Munich, and a Rubik's Cube was depicted on the front cover of Scientific American that same month. Then in June of 81, the Washington Post reported that Rubik's Cube is a puzzle that's moving like fast food right now, this year's hula hoop or bongo board, and by September of 1981, New Scientist noted that the cube had captivated the attention of children of ages from 7 to 70 all over the world this summer. As most people could solve only one or two sides, numerous books were published, including David Singmaster's Notes on Rubik's Magic Cube and Patrick Bostert's You Can Do the Cube. At one stage in 81, 3 of the top 10 best-selling books in the U.S. were books on solving Rubik's Cube, and the best-selling book of 1981 was James G. Norris's The Simple Solution to Rubik's Cube, which sold over 6 million copies. In 1981, the Museum of Modern Art in New York exhibited a Rubik's Cube, and at the 1982 World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee, a 6-foot cube was put on display. In 1983, ABC Television released a cartoon show called Rubik, the Amazing Cube. In June of 92, the first Rubik's Cube World Championship took place in Budapest and would become the only competition recognized as official until the championship was revived in 2003. In October of 1982, the New York Times reported that sales had fallen and that the craze has died. And by 1983, it was clear that sales had plummeted. However, in some countries such as China and the USSR, the craze had started later and demand was still high because of a shortage of cubes. Rubik's Cubes continued to be marketed and sold throughout the 80s and 90s, but it was not until the early 2000s that interest in the cube began increasing again. In the U.S., sales doubled between 2001 and 2003, and the Boston Globe remarked that it was becoming cool to own a cube again. The 2003 Rubik's Cube World Championship was the first speed cubing tournament since 1982. It was held in Toronto and was attended by 83 participants. The tournament led to the formation of the World Cube Association in 2004. Annual sales of Rubik-branded cubes were said to have reached 15 million worldwide in 2008, and part of the new appeal was ascribed to the advent of internet video sites, such as YouTube, which allowed fans to share their solving strategies. Following the expiration of Rubik's patent in 2000, other brands of cubes appeared, especially from Chinese companies. And many of these Chinese-branded cubes have been engineered for speed and are favored by speed cubers. But then on October 27th of 2020, Spin Master said it will pay $50 million to buy the Rubik's Cube brand. Taking advantage of an initial shortage of cubes, many imitations and variations appeared, many of which have violated one or more patents. In 2000, the patents expired, and since then, many Chinese companies have produced copies, modifications, and improvements upon the Rubik and V-Cube designs. Nicholas assigned his patent to his employer, Moculon Research Company, or Corporation, which sued Ideal in 1982, and in 1984, Ideal lost the patent infringement suit and appealed. Then in 1986, the appeals court affirmed the judgment that Rubik's 2x2x2 pocket cube infringed on Nicholas's patent, but overturned the judgment on Rubik's 3x3x3 cube, even while Rubik's patent application was being processed. Terutoshi Ishagi, self-taught engineer and ironworks owner near Tokyo, filed for a Japanese patent for a nearly identical mechanism which was granted in 1976, and until 1999, when an amended Japanese patent law was enforced, Japan's patent office granted Japanese patents for non-disclosed technology within Japan without requiring worldwide novelty. Hence, Ishigi's patent is generally accepted as an independent reinvention at the time. Rubik applied for more patents in 1980, including another Hungarian patent on October 28th, and in the United States, Rubik was granted U.S. patent 4,378,116 on March 29th, 1983 for the cube. This patent expired in 2000. Rubik's Brand Ltd. also holds the registered trademarks for the word Rubik and Rubik's, and for the 2D and 3D visualizations of the puzzle. The trademarks were upheld by a ruling of the General Court of the European Union on November 25th of 2014 in a successful defense against a German toy manufacturer seeking to invalidate them. However, European toy manufacturers are allowed to create differently shaped puzzles that have a similar rotating or twisting functionality of component parts, such as, for example, Squib, Paramix, and Impossible. On November 10th of 2016, Rubik's Cube lost a 10-year battle over a key trademark issue. The European Union's highest court, the Court of Justice, ruled that the puzzle's shape was not sufficient to grant it trademark protection. A standard Rubik's Cube measures 5.6 centimeters on each side. The puzzle consists of 26 unique miniature cubes, also known as cubies or cubelets, and each of these includes a concealed inward extension that interlocks with the other cubes while permitting them to move to different locations. However, the center cube of each of the 6 faces is merely a single square facade. All 6 are affixed to the core mechanism. These provide structure for the other pieces to fit into and rotate around. Hence, there are 21 pieces. A single core piece consisting of 3 intersecting axes, holding the 6 center squares in place but letting them rotate, and 20 smaller plastic pieces that fit into it to form the assembled puzzle. Each of the 6 centered pieces pivots on a fastener held by the centerpiece, a 3D cross. A spring between each fastener and its corresponding piece tensions the piece inward, so that collectively the whole assembly remains compact but can still be easily manipulated. The older versions of the official cube used a screw that can be tightened or loosened to change the feel of the cube. Newer official Rubik's brand cubes have rivets instead of screws and cannot be adjusted. Inexpensive clones do not have screws or springs, and all they have is a plastic clip to keep the centerpiece in place and freely rotate. The cube can be taken apart without much difficulty, typically by rotating the top layer by 45 degrees and then prying one of its edge cubes away from the other two layers. Consequently, it is a simple process to solve a cube by taking it apart and reassembling it in a solved state. There are 6 central pieces that show one colored face, 12 edge pieces that show 2 colored faces, and 8 corner pieces that show 3 colored faces. Each piece shows a unique color and combination, but not all combinations are present. For example, if red and orange are on the opposite sides of the solved cube, there is no edge piece with both red and orange sides. The location of these cubes relative to one another can be altered by twisting an outer third of the cube by increments of 90 degrees. But the location of the color sides relative to one another in the completed state of the puzzle cannot be altered. It is fixed by the relative positions of the center squares. However, cubes with alternative color arrangements also exist. And for example, with the yellow face opposite the green, the blue face opposite the white, and red and orange remaining opposite each other. Douglas Hofstadter, in the July 1982 issue of Scientific American, pointed out that cubes could be colored in such a way as to emphasize the corners or edges rather than the faces as the standard coloring does, but neither of these alternative colorings has ever become popular. The puzzle was originally advertised as having over 3 billion combinations, but only one solution. And depending on how combinations are counted, the actual number is significantly higher. The original 3x3x3 Rubik's Cube has 8 corners and 12 edges. There are 8. That's about 40,320 ways to arrange the corner cubes. And each corner has 3 possible orientations, although only 7 out of 8 can be oriented independently. The orientation of the 8th final corner depends on the preceding 7, giving 2,187 possibilities, and there are 239,500,800. Wow. 239,500,800. Okay. Ways to arrange the edges. Restricted from 12 to the power because edges must be in an even permutation exactly when the corners are. And when the arrangements of centers are also permitted as described below, the rule is that the combined arrangement of corners, edges, and centers must be an even permutation. 11 edges can be flipped independently, with the flip of the 12th depending on the preceding ones, giving 2,048 possibilities. Thus, the total number of arrangements of a Rubik's Cube is a little over 43 quintillion. To put this into perspective, if one had one standardized Rubik's Cube for each permutation, one could cover the Earth's surface 275 times or stack them in a tower 261 light years high. The preceding figure is limited to permutations that can be reached solely by turning the sides of the cube, and if one considers permutations reached through disassembly of the cube, the number becomes 12 times larger, which is approximately 519 quintillion possible arrangements of the pieces that make up the cube, but only 1/12 of these are actually solvable. This is because there is no sequence of moves that will swap a single pair of pieces or rotate a single corner or edge cube. Thus, there are 12 possible sets of reachable configurations, sometimes called universes or orbits, into which the cube can be placed by dismantling and reassembling it. The preceding numbers assume that center faces are in a fixed position. If one considers turning the whole cube to be a different permutation, then each of the preceding numbers should be multiplied by 24. A chosen color can be of one of 6 sides, and then one of the adjacent colors can be in one of 4 positions, and this determines the positions of all remaining colors. The original Rubik's Cube had no orientation markings on the center faces, although some carried the Rubik's Cube mark on the center square of the white face, and therefore solving it does not require any attention to orienting those faces correctly. However, with marker pens, one could, for example, mark the central squares of the unscrambled cube with 4 colored marks on each edge, each corresponding to the color of the adjacent face. A cube marked in this way is referred to as a supercube, and some cubes have also been produced commercially with markings on all the squares, such as the Low Shoe Magic Square or playing card suits. Cubes have also been produced where the 9 stickers on a face are used to make a single larger picture, and center orientation matters on these as well. Thus, one can nominally solve a cube, yet have the markings on the centers rotated, and that becomes an additional test to solve the centers as well. Marking Rubik's Cube centers increases its difficulty because this expands the set of distinguishable possible configurations. There are 2,048 ways to orient the centers, since an even permutation of the corners implies an even number of quarter turns of centuries as well. And the list of the possibilities goes on. There's so many solutions, the algorithms, the relevance of application. You can read it all. There's so many other solutions to go to. And if we had more time to look at these, we probably could do a whole longer scenario on this. But once again, folks, the Rubik's Cube proves that you can sit there for hours upon hours completing records and doing things to kill the time. There's so many variations of Rubik's Cubes, from 2x2x2 to 3x3, 4x4x4, and even the 5x5x5 Professor's Cube. There's also a 7x7x7, and there's also bigger ones too, a 13x13x13 and a 17x17x17. So when you think of Rubik's Cube, think of the original, but remember the variations that go with it, and even the little keychains that have novelty pictures on them as well. That's going to do it for us today on this edition of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Episode 73 is completed. And when we come back, we're going to look at another game in the console wars. Oh, yes. It's high time we look at the ColecoVision. It's coming to a show near you on the next episode of Jay's Retro Toys and Games this Thursday, October 2nd. We'll be there for it, and we hope that you will join us once again for another great show. Till then, I'm Jason DeCanio. Hope your day and your night goes well. Till then, arrivederci and good night.